Well, after I got back from the trial therapy, let's just say me and Mia were really happy to see each other. We hung around in Agua for a couple days, and yeah, it was fun. And we got back to Ethalonia, and well, we were a little bit worried about the war that Ethalonia was going through at the time, and it's a long story, and it's a video for another day. But we had a mostly good Christmas. The boys were down there, and it was fun. But in January 2023, we really had to hold our breaths because, Death Watch, the enemy, did temporarily take over the capital, but they were gone in a couple days. And yeah, that happened in January 2023. But that war is just a video for another day. Okay, it's a video for another day. So it was around Valentine's Day of 2023. We were, trying to get it on, but Mia, she had been acting all moody, and she had also been throwing up. And it was after Valentine's Day that I realized, oh, now I know what's going on. And it was very shortly thereafter that she told me that she was pregnant, and wow, we're gonna have another baby. Wow. Alright. That's going to be difficult, but okay, we can do it. But, I don't know. She was throwing up a lot, and she was, again, kind of moody with me. So, what I decided to do is I decided to just take some time away from her because, there's a lot that I don't understand about what she's going through. I am a man, so I'm going to give her plenty of space, because I'm a man, but I don't know. I know I shouldn't have done this, but I started, burying myself in my work. And it's interesting because in about March 1st or 2nd of 2023, I got an email from another YouTuber who kind of does content like I do, but what she does, she does a lot of ghost videos, like ghost hunting videos, or she'll walk around spooky forests. But anyway, she had emailed me saying, hey, about 8 years ago, you were on the tip of Mount God surviving the cannibalistic Salaji tribe. Okay, well, can you tell me a little bit about those people? And so I did. I advised her to stay away from them, and whatever you do, if you go up to the top of Mount God, where it's snowy all year long, whatever you do not go out at night. Do not. Please do not, because you will die. And your fans will never see you again, Anna. And Anna Turner wrote me back and said, okay, I won't, but there's a rumor that ever since your video surfaced, less and less people have been going up to the top of Mount God, and they're going lower onto the mountains in the middle of the mountain, okay? And there have been several Salaji sightings, including a case of missing hikers. So they could be hunting lower down the mountain. And I said, wait, what? And Anna Turner wrote me back saying, yeah, we're gonna, in a couple days, we're actually gonna go up camping in the middle of Mount God, where it's not really snowy, and they're used to the snow, but in the middle of Mount God, especially around this time of year, it's not snowy, it's just real dreary, it's real cloudy and rainy, but But we're excited. We're going to go and see if we can find cannibalistic tribesmen and see if the rumors are true. And I wrote her back saying, no, please don't do that. You don't want to mess with the Salaji. Trust me, you don't want to mess with them. And she said, oh, it's too late. We're already on our way. And I said, okay. At least let me help you. Where at are you going? Like, where specifically? And they said, okay. And Anna Turner wrote me back. She said, okay, me, my cameraman and writer / researcher / producer / best friend and his dog are, we are going on the Fork Trail. Perhaps you heard of it? And I said, yeah, I've heard of it. It's about 3 or 4 miles away from the road that led to St. Stephen's. I know it. All right, I'll be up there in a minute. And then I jumped in my Jeep and I started going. Well, I pulled into the Forks Trail and I noticed that there was a big black SUV. It wasn't like the white van that the sewer gators had used. So I killed the engine and I noticed that they weren't in the SUV. And oh, great. They've already walked off. But I could see some faint footprints in the mud because it had been raining a few hours before and it was still pretty cloudy. So I walked after them on the trail that they probably used. And I gotta say, hiking alone on that mountain, it's very quiet and real eerie. Like some kind of thick air and a heavy pressure. It's weird. And then I just kept walking and I thought, wait a minute, hold on. What's this random bench doing here in the middle of a trail? And also, is that a street light? Yeah, it looks like a street light that's right beside me. That wasn't there before. I didn't notice that. And then, out of nowhere, I hear like a rustling sound, like leaves being overturned and twigs snapping. And I look over and I said, hello? Hello? And then I pulled out my revolver because I knew that I might be dealing with some Salaji, the cannibals. And then I heard the bush rattle again. And then, woof! I saw a big German Shepherd jump right out at me. And I was breathing real heavy, and I reached out to pet him, and he let me. And I petted his head, and I let him lick my hand a little bit, and he sniffed me, and I noticed he had a collar on, so he wasn't a stray. I looked at him. So I looked at his collar, and it said, Bullet. That's a nice name. Bullet. I bet it's because you're fast, right? And I turned over the collar, and it said, if lost, please return to Alan Wakefield. Alan Wakefield. Wait a minute, hold on. I think I know Alan Wakefield. He works with Anna Turner. He's in several of her videos. Wait, Bullet, do you know where your owner Alan is? And it wagged its tail, and then it shook its head up and down. And then I said, okay, boy, show me to him. Let's go. And so I ran after him, and I ran as fast as I could, and Now I know why they call him Bullet, because he was fast. But I really had to run after him, and I ran until my chest was about to burst and I couldn't breathe, until he suddenly stopped and sat. Uno momento, I said. Uno momento. Whew. I'm about to turn 33. I'm too old to be running like that. Alright, okay. Alright, okay. What's wrong, Bullet? What is it, boy? And he cocked his head to the right, and I saw a small wooden shack. And I thought, oh no, it's always a good idea to go in a cabin in the woods. So I pulled out my revolver again, and like a cop, I walked forward, and I called out. I said, "Who's in there?" But Bullet came in before I did, and I heard a voice on the other side, and I burst in, and then I saw Anna Turner. She raised her arms up and screamed, but Alan Wakefield said, "Oh, okay, Bullet, you brought a friend with you." And I noticed that, well, Anna, she had a bit of a pale face, but she had long brown hair, and she always wore red lipstick. And she was wearing a toboggan, and she was wearing a rather nice Navajo-looking jacket. She was also wearing jeans and Uggs, which I thought that was weird to be wearing that, but okay. And then I looked over at Alan, and he was wearing a thin windbreaker, a red t-shirt, and jeans, and he had spiky black hair and a thin black beard, and it was a real short black beard too. And then I looked down on the poor unfortunate man laying down, and he was holding what appeared to be some cloth or some clothes over his belly, and I thought, oh no, he's been hurt. And then I looked over in this cabin near the fireplace, and I noticed that there were deer skins hanging over the wall. And I looked over and I saw the old familiar Salaji armor and tunic, that old gray uniform. But he didn't have his deer mask on. He was just laying down, and he had darker skin than we had, and he had black hair. So he must be like an OG Salaji. He wasn't recruited, he was an OG. And then I realized that this is a Salaji hunting cabin. They've been going down the mountain to hunt. Have they always done that? I don't know. All I know is that we need to get out of here. And I said, and that's exactly what I said to him. I said, all right, guys, we need to go. Don't worry, I got some strength. I can help your friend up. And I helped him up. And I said to him, all right, what's your name? And he said, Zach. And he was still hurting from that wound in his belly. And it didn't take a detective to find out that those guys had wandered into the hunting cabin, and that Salaji hunter caught him, and then there was a fight, which they got the upper hand on because it was 3 against 1, and poor Zach got stabbed because, yep, the Salaji, they may not have guns, but they are still armed to the teeth. And I said, all right, guys, it's only about a mile or two back to the trail. And then I had to carry Zach through about a mile of rough terrain, but we eventually got on the main trail. And then I said, okay, I've been running all day and I've been carrying Zach here. Alan, can you help me? And Alan said, oh, yeah, sure. Oh, Anna, look after Bullet for me, all right? Yeah, and Bullet was still running with us. And then we walked down that trail some more. And then about 500 yards in the distance, I saw, look, it's the end of the trail. Your SUV and my Jeep is at the end of it. We can go. We're going to be okay. And Alan said, all right, I don't know about you, but I intend to make a very long documentary about this experience. I'll tell you that. And then, out of nowhere, an arrow burst right through his eye. And the blood squirted out, and he lurched back and then fell forward. And then I looked back and I noticed that crouched down high up in a tree was the old familiar deer mask with the antlers sticking out and the black and brown paint all over the stone mask that they all wore. So I pulled out my revolver and I ran towards him, and then an arrow went flying near me, but I ducked just in time. And then I stopped about 10 feet away from the tree. I took aim, and then the archer knocked another arrow, and then I aimed, but I knew that they still have bulletproof armor. They had made that themselves out of all the stones and the minerals of Earth. But I knew where their weak spots were, the knees. And because this hunter was crouching on top of a tree, his knees were right exposed. So I took aim, and then an arrow hit me right in the chest, right near the shoulder. But I just looked at the arrow and then looked back up at him. And I couldn't see the hunter's facial expressions, but I knew he was terrified. He was terrified that I hadn't collapsed yet. And then I took aim again and shot him right in the knee. He howled in pain, and as he was falling down, he grabbed the branch that he was standing on, and he was hanging down, and he started to lift his arm up, but I also knew that there was a weak spot on the elbows, because even if they're wearing armor, they need to bend their bodies so they can climb and run. So I aimed for the opposite side of the elbow, and then I saw a quick flash of blood, and then the hunter fell about 6 feet, and he landed with a thud, and his quiver and bow fell to his side. And then I ran over to him, and I noticed that he was still alive because he was moving a little bit. And then, right in front of him where he could see me, I grabbed the arrow that he'd shot me with, and I snapped it right off. And then, with grit, I pulled it out, and then the blood flowed quick first, and then it slowed, and eventually the wound started closing up like it always does. And then I aimed my gun one last time, and I aimed it right at the front of his neck, and I aimed it only 2 feet away, and then he was nearly decapitated, and he was no more. And then I ran back. I had to run past poor Alan Wakefield's body. And then I saw Anna Turner trying to help poor Zach in the SUV, and he was hysterical. But Anna was trying to keep herself together. And then she put him in the back seat, and then got into the driver's seat, and then started the SUV, and I screamed, "Bullet! Bullet! Come on, boy!" Because Anna, in her hurry, had forgotten Bullet. And then I opened the door for him, and I gestured for him to get in my back seat. And thank God that Bullet was a trusting dog, because he ran right in my car. And then I closed the door and started up, and then I pulled out, and I pulled right beside the SUV. I rolled my window down, and I shouted out, "Okay, quick, follow me to the hospital." And then I did. We sped the whole way there, and then we pulled into the hospital parking lot, and I helped Anna and Zach into the emergency room. It took a little while to get Zach actually in a hospital room, but they did. And other than a severe cut and a puncture wound brought on by the knife fight he was in by the cannibalistic tribesmen, he was fine. But Alan, we were able to recover his body the next day, and his family did bury him properly. And because her apartment didn't allow dogs, and the family didn't want the dog, so yeah, I decided to adopt Bullet. Although it was quite a surprise when I came home to Mia and I was leading a dog by the leash. And when I said I got a dog, I think she thought that I got like a little dog, like a Yorkie or a beagle. But nope, I bought in a full-on 2.5-year-old German Shepherd. And she was very skeptical of him at first, but eventually she was making him his favorite doggy meal. She would make him like doggy beef stew, which is basically like raw beef combined with gravy and some raw peas and carrots. And it's actually pretty good for dogs. And she always enjoyed playing some tug-of-war with him. And yep, she also ended up getting a subscription to Chewy, and she always loved picking out the best food for Bullet. And I still, to this day, enjoy taking him on walks.